I'm Ashley Carter, 27, female. I live in a small but comfortable apartment in the city, a place I earned through long nights and sheer determination. As a marketing manager for a fast, growing tech company, my life is a structured world of data, strategy, and relentless deadlines. It's a demanding career, but it's mine, and I'm proud of it. For years, my work was my focus, a quiet backdrop to the loud, vibrant life of my younger sister, Olivia. I never thought my carefully built world and her picture, perfect one, were on a collision course, set to explode at the one place that should have been a celebration of love, her wedding. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The sun seemed to shine just for Olivia. That's how it had always been. Growing up, she was the artist, the free spirit, the one who could charm anyone with a single, dazzling smile. I was the responsible one, the planner, the quiet achiever. Our mother, Sarah, a retired teacher with a heart too big for her own good, called Olivia her sunshine and me her rock. It was a loving distinction, but over the years it began to feel like a label that defined my purpose, to be solid, dependable, and permanently in the background while Olivia shone. Her wedding day was the pinnacle of her brilliance. As a high-end wedding planner herself, Olivia had orchestrated every detail with meticulous, almost obsessive precision. The venue was a sprawling vineyard estate with rolling hills and ancient oak trees dripping with fairy lights. The theme was enchanted elegance, a phrase she must have used 100 times in the months leading up to the big day. Everything from the hand, calligraphed place cards to the 7-tier cake adorned with spun, sugar flowers was flawless. It was a wedding ripped from the pages of a magazine, and Olivia was the radiant bride at its center. Her groom, Major Ben Adams, was a man who seemed equally perfect. At 35, he was handsome, distinguished, and carried the quiet confidence of a man who had seen the world and knew his place in it. He was an army major, a fact Olivia mentioned at every opportunity. My major, she would call him, her voice filled with a proprietary pride that always made me cringe slightly. Ben was a good man from what I could tell. He was polite, attentive, and looked at my sister with a kind of awestruck adoration that seemed genuine. He treated me with respect, always asking about my work with an interest that felt sincere, even if Olivia usually cut in to steer the conversation back to her latest floral arrangement or catering triumph. My role in the wedding was predictably the maid of honor. This translated into a year of being Olivia's unpaid assistant, personal therapist, and financial buffer. I organized spreadsheets for guest lists, mediated disputes with vendors when Olivia's vision clashed with their reality, and quietly transferred money into her account when her grand plans exceeded her budget, always with the gentle excuse, "Consider it an early wedding gift." My own job, a demanding role as a marketing manager at a cybersecurity firm, was something I juggled in the stolen hours of the night. I was good at my job, respected in my field, but in the world of the Carter family, my professional achievements were a quiet hum next to the symphony of Olivia's life. On the morning of the wedding, the bridal suite was a storm of hairspray, tulle, and nervous energy. Olivia was in her element, directing the hairstylists and makeup artists like a general commanding her troops. Our mother floated around the room, her eyes misty with tears, constantly murmuring about how this was the happiest day of her life. "Ashley, can you please find out why the string quartet is doing their sound check now? It's ruining my zen." Olivia called out from her makeup chair, not even bothering to look at me. "On it," I said, already dialing the venue coordinator. That was my function, to handle the unglamorous logistics so she could remain pristine and unstressed. Later, as I helped her into her couture gown, a magnificent creation of lace and silk, she looked at our reflections in the mirror. "You know, Ash," she said, her tone unusually soft, "I really appreciate everything you've done. I know I can be a lot." For a moment, I felt a warmth spread through my chest. It was a rare moment of acknowledgement, a glimpse of the sister I remembered from our childhood, before the competition and the unspoken resentments had built a wall between us. "Of course, Liv, it's your day. You deserve for it to be perfect." She smiled, but the smile didn't quite reach her eyes. It was a practiced, perfect smile for the cameras that would be flashing all day. I know, and it will be. As I stood by her side at the altar, watching her recite her vows to Ben, I felt a strange mix of emotions. There was pride, a genuine happiness that my sister had found someone who seemed to truly love her, but underneath it there was a familiar, weary ache, I saw how everyone looked at our family, her friends, Ben's military colleagues in their crisp dress uniforms. They saw the beautiful, charming, successful woman she presented to the world. They didn't see the girl who would borrow my favorite clothes and return them stained, who would steal my ideas for school projects and claim them as her own, who had a cruel knack for saying things that cut deeper than any knife, always disguised as a joke. I pushed the thoughts away. Today was her day. Today, I was just the rock, the dependable maid of honor, standing in the background, making sure the sunshine could shine without any clouds in her sky. I smoothed down my simple, elegant bridesmaid dress, a dress she had chosen, in a color that she knew did nothing for me, and fixed a polite smile on my face. The ceremony was beautiful, the vows were heartfelt. The kiss was cinematic, everything was perfect, but as they walked back down the aisle, showered in white rose petals, I couldn't shake a cold, unsettling feeling in the pit of my stomach. The day was far from over. The reception was held in the estate's grand ballroom, a cavernous space with crystal chandeliers and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the vineyard. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and peonies. Laughter and the clinking of champagne glasses echoed off the high ceilings. I had done my duty, mingling with guests, troubleshooting a minor issue with the seating chart, and ensuring my mother stayed hydrated. My own maid of honor speech was scheduled right before Olivia's. I had spent weeks on that speech. I wanted it to be perfect, a heartfelt, loving tribute that was both funny and sincere. I spoke of our childhood, sharing a sanitized, sweet anecdote about building forts out of blankets and dreaming of our futures. I talked about Olivia's passion and her incredible talent for creating beauty in the world. I welcomed Ben to the family, telling him how happy we all were that Olivia had found a partner so kind and strong. I kept it short, sweet, and safe. As I finished, raising my glass, the room erupted in applause. I saw Ben give me a warm, appreciative nod. Even Olivia managed a genuine smile. I felt a wave of relief wash over me as I returned to my seat at the head table. I had done my part. A little while later, it was Olivia's turn to speak. The DJ introduced the beautiful bride, Mrs. Olivia Adams, and she practically floated to the microphone, her gown shimmering under the lights. She looked every bit the blushing bride, her eyes sparkling with what everyone assumed were tears of joy. She started by thanking everyone for coming, her voice saccharine sweet. She gushed about her new husband, Ben, calling him her hero and her king. She thanked her parents for their endless support. Then her eyes landed on me. A slow, deliberate smile spread across her face, and the microphone stand seemed to become her personal stage. And of course, she began, her voice dripping with mock affection. I have to thank my big sister, Ashley, my maid of honor. She paused, letting the silence hang in the air as all eyes turned to me. I smiled back, expecting a heartfelt thank you, a shared memory, anything to reciprocate the warmth of my own speech, you know. Olivia continued, her voice gaining a theatrical edge. Every family has its roles. I was always the creative one, the dreamer, and Ashley. Well, Ashley has always been the practical one, the security. A few people chuckled, unsure if it was a joke. I felt my smile tighten. No, really, she insisted, waving a dismissive hand. She's like a security guard for our family, always there in the background, making sure things run smoothly. So dependable, so sturdy. The word hung in the air, heavy and unflattering. She works with computers or something. Very important, I'm sure, but nobody special, not the kind of person who creates magic like this. She gestured around the magnificent ballroom, a clear indication that she was the special one, the creator of magic, while I was just the functional, boring cog in the machine. The room was quiet now. The few chuckles had died out, replaced by an awkward, palpable tension. I could feel hundreds of pairs of eyes on me, a mix of pity and confusion. My face burned with a hot, creeping shame. She wasn't just minimizing my career. She was reducing my entire identity to that of a faceless, nameless guard, a background character in the story of her glamorous life. She wasn't done, but we need people like that, don't we? The ones who handle the boring stuff so the rest of us can shine. She raised her champagne flute, so a toast to my sister Ashley, for being our family's own personal security guard. Thank you for watching the perimeter. A smattering of confused, polite applause broke the silence. Olivia beamed, as if she had just delivered the most clever and charming speech of all time, and took a delicate sip of her champagne. She glided back to her seat next to Ben, leaning in to kiss him on the cheek as if nothing had happened. I sat there, frozen. My blood had turned to ice. It wasn't just an insult. It was a public execution of my worth, delivered with a smile on the happiest day of her life. She had taken my love, my support, my sacrifices, and twisted them into a punchline. I looked across the table, expecting to see shock or anger on my mother's face, but she just looked uncomfortable, offering me a weak, placating smile as if to say, "That's just Olivia. Don't make a scene." Then I looked at Ben. His face was a mask of stone. The adoring look he'd had for his bride was gone, replaced by something cold and unreadable. He wasn't looking at Olivia. He wasn't looking at the applauding guests. His sharp, intelligent eyes were fixed directly on me. There was no pity in his gaze. There was something else, something I couldn't quite decipher. It was a look of intense, analytical focus, as if he were assessing a threat or perhaps uncovering a lie. In that moment, I knew this wasn't over. My sister, in her moment of triumph, had made a critical miscalculation. She had forgotten who her husband was and what men like him were trained to do, recognize an enemy even when they're disguised as a bride. The rest of the reception passed in a blur of humiliation. I retreated into myself, offering tight, lipped smiles and monosyllabic answers to anyone who approached me. The joy had been vacuumed from the room, leaving only the hollow performance of celebration. Olivia, oblivious or perhaps emboldened by her public display of cruelty, danced and laughed, the perfect hostess of her perfect party. She didn't speak to me again for the rest of the night. I watched Ben closely. He played the part of the happy groom, dancing with his new wife, shaking hands with her friends, and laughing at the best man's jokes. But his eyes had lost their warmth. Every time he looked at Olivia, there was a new, subtle reserve. He was watchful, an officer on reconnaissance, gathering intelligence in hostile territory. His gaze would occasionally flick over to me, a quick, almost imperceptible check-in. It wasn't comforting, it was unnerving. I felt like a piece of a puzzle he was trying to solve. I escaped as soon as I could, pleading a headache. My mother tried to stop me, her face etched with a familiar, weary resignation. "Ashley, don't let her get to you," she whispered, clutching my arm. "She didn't mean it like that." "Yes, she did, Mom," I replied, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. "She always does, and you always make excuses for her." I pulled my arm away and left without another word. The next 2 weeks were silent. Olivia and Ben went on their extravagant honeymoon to the Maldives, and my only updates came from the flood of professionally edited photos she posted on social media. Pictures of them smiling on a white sand beach, clinking champagne glasses on a private yacht, her captions filled with hashtags like #blessed and #perfect-husband. It was a masterclass in manufactured happiness. I didn't hear a word from either of them. I didn't expect to. I threw myself back into my work, finding solace in the logical, predictable world of data analytics and marketing campaigns. It was a world where effort was rewarded and results were measurable, a stark contrast to the shifting, treacherous landscape of my family. Then, one rainy Tuesday afternoon, an email landed in my inbox. The sender was Ben Adams. The subject line was simply a question. My heart hammered against my ribs. I clicked it open. The email was short and formal. "Ashley, I hope this email finds you well. I apologize for the directness, but something from the wedding has been bothering me, and I was hoping you might be able to provide some clarification. Olivia mentioned that you work with computers as a security guard of sorts. Forgive my ignorance, but could you tell me the name of the company you work for? I have a professional interest in the tech sector, particularly cybersecurity. Thank you, Ben. I read the email 3 times. It was a simple question, but the subtext was screamingly loud. He was checking her story. The casual, dismissive way Olivia had described my job hadn't sat right with him. He was a military officer, a man for whom precision, titles, and a clear chain of command were everything. The vague, condescending description of my career had clearly raised a flag. My first instinct was to protect the family peace, to give a vague answer and let it go. It's what I had always done, but the memory of that public humiliation was still a raw, open wound. She hadn't just insulted me. She had lied, painting a picture of me as an insignificant nobody to elevate herself in front of her new, important husband and his equally important friends. For the first time in my life, I felt a flicker of something other than resignation. It was a cold, hard spark of anger. I typed out a reply, my fingers flying across the keyboard. "Ben, it's good to hear from you. I hope you and Olivia had a wonderful honeymoon. There seems to have been a misunderstanding." I'm not a security guard. I am the senior marketing manager for Cybersecure Solutions. I paused, my cursor blinking. Cybersecure Solutions wasn't just any tech company. It was one of the leading cybersecurity firms in the country. We held multi-million-dollar contracts with Fortune 500 companies and, more importantly, with various branches of the U.S. government and Department of Defense. Our work was highly sensitive. Our reputation was impeccable. I added one final, crucial sentence. We actually hold a significant contract with the Department of the Army, handling a large portion of their network threat analysis. It's possible you've come across our work without realizing it. Best, Ashley, I hit send before I could second. Guess myself. A strange sense of calm settled over me. I hadn't been aggressive or accusatory. I had simply stated the facts. I had handed Major Ben Adams a piece of intelligence. A single verifiable fact that directly contradicted the narrative his new wife had so carefully constructed. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that a man like him would know exactly what to do with it. He wouldn't just accept it, he would investigate. Ben's reply came less than an hour later. It was even shorter than his first email. Ashley, thank you. That is very clarifying. That was it. 2 words, very clarifying. But in the concise, deliberate language of a military officer, they spoke volumes. He now possessed 2 conflicting sets of data, his wife's dismissive caricature and the reality of my high-level position at a firm that did business with his own employer. The discrepancy was not minor, it was a chasm, and for a man trained in threat assessment and verification, such a chasm would demand exploration. What I didn't know at the time was the extent of Ben's investigation. I found out the details much later, piecing them together from conversations and confessions that came in the messy fallout. His first step upon returning from his honeymoon was professional. He didn't just take my word for it. He used his official channels to verify my employment. It would have been easy for him. A simple inquiry into the contractors associated with his department. He would have discovered not only that I was indeed the senior marketing manager at Cybersecure Solutions, but also the scope of my responsibilities. He would have seen that my role involved strategy, high-level client relations, and a deep understanding of the very security infrastructure that protected men and women like him. I wasn't just working with computers. I was a key player in a critical industry. This initial discovery opened the floodgates of his suspicion. If Olivia had lied about something so easily verifiable, what else had she lied about? It was a classic thread, pulling exercise. Once you find one loose thread on a perfect garment, you can't help but tug at it, and soon the whole thing begins to unravel. His investigation turned from my career to Olivia's. As a successful wedding planner, her entire business was built on a foundation of budgets, contracts, and client relationships. Ben, being a practical and financially astute man, had contributed a significant amount of his own savings to the wedding budget. Olivia had presented him with a beautifully designed, itemized spreadsheet detailing every cost, from the venue to the vintage stamps on the invitations. Now, with a newfound sense of distrust, Ben began to look at that spreadsheet not as a groom, but as an auditor. He started making quiet phone calls. He called the florist, praising their beautiful work before casually inquiring about the final invoice. He contacted the caterer, the string quartet, the venue manager. He was polite, charming, and utterly methodical. One by one, the discrepancies emerged. The florist's final bill was 20% lower than the number on Olivia's spreadsheet. The caterer had provided a discount for upfront payment that was never reflected in the budget she showed him. The most damning discovery came from the venue. The manager, a friendly woman named Patricia, was happy to chat with the handsome major. When Ben mentioned the final cost, Patricia let out a low whistle. "Wow, she told you it cost that much," Patricia had said. "She got our family and friends rate. Her best friend from design school is my niece. We gave her a 40% discount on the booking fee." The numbers didn't add up. There was a gap of nearly $50,000 between what the wedding had actually cost and what Olivia had claimed it cost. It was a systematic, calculated inflation of expenses. The money, Ben realized with a dawning horror, had gone directly into Olivia's personal business account. She had used their wedding, funded in large part by his life savings, to secretly finance the expansion of her own company. The early wedding gift I had given her to cover overages was just another drop in the bucket of her deception. The financial betrayal was a significant blow, but Ben's investigation didn't stop there. He started looking back at their relationship, re-examining conversations and stories Olivia had told him about her past, about her family. He remembered how she'd always laughed off my job, calling it boring tech stuff, and subtly steering conversations away from it. He recalled her frequent, casual remarks about her struggles. As a small business owner, her laments about needing capital to grow, laments that had often preceded generous financial gifts from him. He even called my mother. He was gentle with her, phrasing his questions carefully. He asked about our childhood, about Olivia's relationship with me. My mother, loyal to a fault, gave him the same sanitized version of our family history she gave everyone. But Ben was trained to read between the lines, to detect evasions and omissions. He heard the defensiveness in her voice when he asked why Olivia seemed to resent my success. He noted the way she changed the subject. The picture that emerged was not of the charming, brilliant, and slightly naive artist he thought he had married. It was of a deeply insecure, manipulative, and pathologically dishonest woman. A woman who had constructed a flawless facade to hide the rot underneath. The security guard comment was no longer just a cruel, thoughtless insult. Ben now understood it for what it was. A calculated attempt to devalue me in his eyes, to ensure that he would never see me as an equal, or worse, as a credible source who might one day expose her. She wasn't just belittling her sister, she was preemptively neutralizing a threat to her elaborate web of lies, and for a man like Major Ben Adams, whose life and career were built on honor, integrity, and trust, this was an unforgivable betrayal. While Ben was conducting his silent, meticulous investigation, I was trying to move on. I had muted Olivia's social media profiles and was keeping my conversations with my mother brief and superficial. I knew confronting Olivia directly would be pointless. It would devolve into a storm of tears, denials, and accusations, and somehow I would end up being cast as the villain for ruining her happiness. I had played that role too many times before. This time I chose silence. About a month after the wedding, I was working late on a major project proposal for a new government contract. It was a huge opportunity for my company, and I had been putting in 70-hour weeks to get it right. As I was referencing some data, I came across a file from a few years prior. It was a project I had spearheaded for a financial services client, developing a marketing strategy around their new fraud detection software. To illustrate its effectiveness, we had created a detailed, step-by-step guide on how to spot financial deception, inflated invoices, ghost vendors, duplicate payments. It was a masterclass in forensic accounting for laypeople. Looking at the file, an idea began to form in my mind. It was cold, precise, and utterly ruthless. It wasn't about revenge in the traditional sense. It wasn't about shouting or crying or demanding an apology. It was about presenting the unvarnished, undeniable truth. I spent the next 2 hours stripping the guide of all company branding and client-specific information. I reformatted it into a clean, simple document. I added a new cover page with a single, unambiguous title, A Pattern of Deception, How to Identify Financial Fraud in Personal and Professional Relationships. Then I began to add my own evidence. I went back through my bank statements from the past year, highlighting the transfers I had made to Olivia's account, the thousands of dollars for the wedding overages, the money for the deposit on the caterer she claimed she couldn't cover, the loan for her new business laptop. I scanned the statements, anonymizing my personal details but leaving the dates and amounts crystal clear. I added them as an appendix to the document, Appendix A case study in personal financial exploitation. Finally, I printed the entire dossier. It was about 20 pages long. I didn't add a note. I didn't sign my name. The evidence spoke for itself. I slipped the document into a standard, plain manila envelope. The next morning, on my way to work, I mailed it to Ben's home address, the one he now shared with my sister. I didn't use a return address. My hands were steady as I dropped the envelope into the mailbox. I felt no rage, no glee, no satisfaction. I felt a profound and chilling sense of clarity. I was not the security guard Olivia had painted me as, but I was in my own way an expert in security. My entire career was built on identifying threats, analyzing vulnerabilities, and exposing breaches. Olivia had always seen my practicality as a weakness, a sign that I was boring and unimaginative. She had failed to understand that practicality is its own form of power. It is the power of facts, of evidence, of cold, hard reality. I had just delivered a threat assessment directly to the one person who would understand it. I didn't know exactly what Ben would do with the information. I didn't need to. I had provided the intelligence. The major would handle the operation. Days turned into a week. The silence was absolute. I half expected a frantic, furious call from Olivia or a cold, dismissive email from Ben. Nothing came. The quiet was more unnerving than any confrontation. I focused on my work, pouring all my energy into the project proposal. The day of the big presentation arrived. I was in our main conference room, walking my CEO and the board through the final slides, when my phone, which I had set to silent, buzzed on the table. It was a text from an unknown number. I ignored it, finishing my presentation with a confidence that I didn't entirely feel. The meeting was a success. My CEO clapped me on the shoulder, congratulating me on a job well done. As soon as the room cleared, I picked up my phone. The text was from Ben. The package was received. Thank you. Tonight is the night. My parents' 40th anniversary dinner. Your presence is not required, but I thought you should know. My blood ran cold. His parents' anniversary dinner. It was a large family event, a gathering of the Addams clan. He was going to do it there, in front of his entire family. It was a move of shocking strategic brilliance. It wasn't just a confrontation. It was a court-martial, and Olivia was the one on trial. The Addams family anniversary party was held at a private dining room in one of the city's most exclusive hotels. It was a formal affair, a celebration of 40 years of marriage for Ben's parents, a retired general and his wife. The guest list included aunts, uncles, cousins, and close family friends, the core of the Addams social and familial circle. It was a world built on tradition, honor, and an unshakable code of conduct. Olivia, I later learned, was in her element. She wore a new designer dress and played the role of the perfect daughter-in-law, charming Ben's relatives and recounting curated, glamorous stories of their honeymoon. She was, for all intents and purposes, the jewel in the Addams family crown, the beautiful bride of their decorated son. She had no idea that she was walking into an ambush. Ben was, by all accounts, the model of a devoted husband and son. He was attentive to Olivia, affectionate with his parents, and engaging with his relatives. He waited. He let the dinner progress through the appetizer and main course. He let the wine flow and the conversation bubble. He waited until the dessert plates were being cleared and his father, General Addams, tapped his glass for a speech. The general gave a touching, heartfelt toast to his wife. When he was finished, he turned the floor over to his son. Ben, would you like to say a few words? Ben stood up, a champagne flute in his hand. The room fell silent. He looked calm, composed, his posture as straight and unyielding as ever. He began by congratulating his parents, his voice steady and warm. He spoke of their example, of the lessons they had taught him about love, loyalty, and most importantly, integrity. Integrity, he repeated, letting the words settle in the quiet room. It's a value we hold dear in our family, and a value that is the very bedrock of my life in the army. It is the quality of being honest and having strong moral principles. He paused and turned his head slightly, his gaze sweeping over the table until it landed on his wife. Olivia was smiling, basking in the glow of her husband's speech. When I married Olivia, Ben continued, his voice losing a fraction of its warmth, I believed I was marrying a woman who shared those values, a woman of substance, honesty, and character. He took a slow, deliberate sip of his champagne. The atmosphere in the room began to shift. This was not the celebratory toast everyone was expecting. Over the past month, however, I have been on a journey of discovery. I have learned that the foundation of my marriage is not built on honesty, but on a series of carefully constructed and deeply cynical lies. A collective gasp went through the room. Olivia's smile froze on her face, her eyes wide with confusion and panic. She started to say something, to whisper his name, but he held up a hand to silence her, his movement sharp and commanding. I have learned. He said, his voice now cold as steel, addressing the entire room but his eyes locked on his wife, that our wedding, a sacred event that I funded with my life savings, was used as a vehicle for financial fraud. Invoices were inflated, discounts were hidden, tens of thousands of dollars were systematically siphoned into my wife's business account. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a summary of his findings, the real invoices next to the fraudulent ones. He placed it on the table with a quiet, definitive click. I have learned. He went on, his voice relentless, that my wife has a habit of misrepresenting reality to suit her own narrative. She told me her sister was nobody special, a mere security guard. The truth, her sister is a senior manager at one of the top cybersecurity firms in the nation, a firm my own army Contract swift to protect our soldiers. A woman of substance and achievement, whose character Olivia tried to assassinate in order to make herself feel bigger. Olivia's face had drained of all color. She looked desperately around the table, seeking an ally, but all she found were the shocked and hardening faces of her new family. A marriage, like a military unit, cannot function without trust, Ben said, his voice low and final. It is the core of everything, and that trust has been irrevocably broken. I cannot and will not build a life on a foundation of lies and deceit. He set his champagne flute down on the table, the crystal making a soft, funereal chime. He looked directly at Olivia, his face a mask of cold disappointment. So, Olivia, I am not giving a toast tonight. I am giving you a notice. Our marriage is over. My lawyer will be in contact with yours tomorrow. I suggest you find a way to pay back the money you stole. He then turned to his stunned parents and the silent, watching guests. I apologize for bringing this matter into your celebration, but integrity demands that the truth be brought into the light. Without another word, he turned and walked out of the private dining room, leaving behind the wreckage of his short-lived marriage. He left Olivia sitting alone at the table, exposed and disgraced in front of the very people she had tried so desperately to impress. The perfect day, the perfect wedding, the perfect husband, it had all been a mirage, and now the illusion had shattered, leaving only the ugly, undeniable truth. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The story of what happened at the anniversary dinner spread like wildfire through the Adams social circle. Olivia was ostracized overnight. Her attempts to spin the story to paint Ben as cruel and unstable fell on deaf ears. Ben was a known quantity, a man of unimpeachable honor. Olivia was the newcomer, and her brief, disastrous marriage had exposed her as a fraud. She called me, of course. The first call was a string of furious, tear-choked voicemails accusing me of ruining her life. She blamed me for sending the stupid envelope, for turning Ben against her, for being jealous of her happiness. It was the classic Olivia playbook. Deflect, deny, attack. I didn't answer. I didn't call back. There was nothing left to say. Her next call, a week later, was different. It was desperate. Her business, which was heavily reliant on word-of-mouth referrals within the city's elite social circles, was collapsing. Clients were canceling. Vendors were demanding payment upfront. The $50,000 she had embezzled from the wedding budget was gone, spent on a lavish new office space and a marketing campaign that was now useless. She was facing financial ruin and a very real threat of legal action from Ben. She begged me for money, for help, for a place to stay. For the first time in my life, I said no. The divorce was quick and quiet. Ben's lawyers were efficient. Faced with incontrovertible evidence of fraud, Olivia had no choice but to agree to his terms, which included a repayment plan for the money she had taken. She was forced to sell her business and its assets for a fraction of their worth just to make the first payment. The most painful fallout was with my mother. She was devastated, caught between her two daughters. She couldn't understand my refusal to help Olivia, my coldness, in the face of my sister's downfall. She's your sister, Ashley. She would plead with me over the phone. Family is supposed to be there for each other no matter what. Family is also supposed to be built on respect and honesty, Mom. I told her, my voice weary but firm. You taught me that, but you never made Olivia learn it. You excused her behavior her entire life, and this is the result. Our relationship became strained, filled with the heavy weight of things left unsaid. It's a rift that has yet to fully heal. A few months after the divorce was finalized, Ben contacted me one last time. He wanted to meet for coffee. I was hesitant, but I agreed. We met at a quiet cafe far from either of our neighborhoods. He looked older, more tired than I had ever seen him, but his eyes were clear. He apologized. I'm sorry, Ashley, he said, stirring his black coffee. I'm sorry for what my marriage to your sister put you through. That toast. It was unforgivable. I should have said something then and there. You did say something, I replied, eventually. He nodded, a grim acknowledgement. I am trained to assess a situation before I act. My first assessment of your sister was a catastrophic failure. You were collateral damage in my mistake. He told me about his investigation, about the depth of her lies. He also told me he was being deployed in 2 weeks for a year. Long tour overseas. It was a voluntary assignment. He needed a change of scenery, a new mission. Before we parted ways, he looked at me, a genuine, sad smile on his face. For what it's worth, he said, your company does excellent work. Your family may not have appreciated it, but the U.S. Army does. It was the highest compliment he could give. Today, my life is quiet. I won the new contract for my company and was promoted to director. My work is challenging and fulfilling, My relationship with my mother is slowly mending, one tentative phone call at a time. Olivia moved to a different city to start over. I hear from her sometimes on holidays through short, stilted text messages. She has a new job working in retail. I don't feel triumphant. I don't feel a sense of victory. The revenge was not sweet. It was just necessary. It was the logical conclusion to a lifetime of quiet injustices. I did not act out of malice. I acted out of a need for the truth to be seen. I simply provided the facts, and the world rearranged itself accordingly. My sister had built her life on a foundation of shimmering, beautiful lies. All I did was hold up a mirror. The rest was just the fallout.